Hey guys, 'tis I, Iggy, once again. I would say that it's Barb, but nobody knows who the hell Barb is in the 3D community, so I just stick with Iggy because everybody knows who Iggy is. Well, maybe not everybody, but anyway, that's besides the point. Today I'm going to teach you how to paint jewels in Photoshop. We're going to paint a scarab beetle from ancient Egyptian lore. What you're looking at is a blank canvas that I've already got set up. I've flood filled it in with like a medium darkish kind of gray, just for the background. I'm using Wacom and Photoshop CS5 for this. Again, you can adapt this tutorial to PSP. You don't really need a Wacom to paint jewels. You just need a little bit of patience and some free time to get it perfect. So to start off, I'm going to add a new layer by going to Layer, New, and then Layer. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts if you know them, but I never tend to use them. I don't know why. I just don't in Photoshop. And we're going to choose a color. As you can already see that I've chosen lapis because that was most commonly what they made scarab beetles out of in ancient Egypt. And we're going to select this nifty little tool over here, and this is called the Ellipse Tool. And what it's going to do is it'll give you a vector circle. And I'm going to keep this relatively small because I have plans of painting extending wings off of it in this tutorial as well. So you want to kind of keep it relatively small in your scene page, PSD layer, whatever you want to call it. And then to start off, we're going to select a burn tool, and we're going to put the mode to highlights. And we want a relatively big brush size in, comparison to the edge of the circle that we've painted. And this is because we're going to paint a shadow around it. Scarabs are typically made out of faience, so what we need here is to make a cabochon, which is basically a jewel that has no facets. It's a smoothed, shiny jewel, but we want to give it dimension. So first we're going to paint this shadow, and we need to make sure we have shape dynamics off, which you can see it's unchecked on my screen. And we're just going to go around, and we're going to paint a shadow around the entire perimeter of the circle. And this will just give it some depth to make it look more jewel-like. And see, that wasn't so bad. That was pretty easy. But now we're going to select our dodge tool, and we're going to click our range and select shadows. And it has to be shadows, and you'll see why in a minute. For the brush, we want shape dynamics on this time. I can't seem to say shape dynamics today. I'm going to have to practice that. And we're going to go back to our circle, and we're going to make this a little bit smaller. And we're just going to kind of paint a very rough glint. It doesn't have to be perfect, because as you will see in a minute, we're going to use the smudge tool right here to straighten it out. And this will actually make it look a little bit more like a shine on a stone than a messy mess that we had before. And you can just push this around and get it to where you like it. Maybe you decide, oh, like I did, that's a little too long or too prominent, and you can kind of fade out the edges of it as I'm doing on the screen. And I think that side looks pretty okay. So I'm going to work on this side now. And it might take you a little bit of time to get a look that you actually are okay with or you like. And it's just the way painting is. It takes time, takes practice, and almost never is it perfect the first time you paint it. You've always got to kind of mess with it and get it to where you like the result. Sometimes it works out that you just happen to get that result quicker than other times, but you just got to keep, working with it and smudging it around, and I think that's pretty good. So now we've got a basic jewel down. Now we're going to add a new layer, and we're using the same tool in the same color, the lapis, and we're going to paint a head. It's okay if it doesn't land where you want it because we've added it to a new layer, so we can just move it to where we want it to go. And we're going to repeat that step again. Shade the outside. And paint our little glint of light. This time we want it to be a little smaller, a little different. And we might need to shrink our smudge tool a little bit because the head is much smaller. And I'm going to leave it just like that. So now we have a head. We're going to go ahead and we're going to merge this layer down onto the layer below it so that we can kind of, let me zoom in, and smudge this out so that it looks like it's one fluent piece. And the burn is a little bit not prominent enough. And there we have the base of our scarab. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a bezel around it. Because a scarab would typically be used in decorative art or as jewelry, we want plenty and lots of gold because the Egyptians loved their gold. We don't want to get rid of lapis. So I'm going to change this one and pick a gold color. Now it's important when you're painting gold not to pick something too yellow. Gold has a slight tawny look to it, like a pinkish, almost orangey kind of color. So we're going to paint around this, or you can use this if you prefer. I'm just going to paint with my brush because I'm sadistic and I like to do things like that. Sucker for punishment. That's me. And just go around the perimeter, and if your lines aren't straight, don't sweat it because we can use our smudge tool to fix it. As I said before, the smudge tool fixes everything. It's the most wonderful tool of all. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I really like it, so that's my story and I'm sticking to it. And if you find that your lines are kind of icky, then you just kind of smudge them out and get them straighter. It's okay if the edge is a little blurry. Won't make nothing too bad. And that right there is a little inconsistent. So I'm going to go ahead and paint a little more in there. And we don't want too much of a glowy effect going because we want this to be semi-hard edged. A little softer isn't a big deal, but a lot of softer and yeah, it'll start looking like it's glowing in the dark. And that's not the look we're going for. I'm going to smudge this out. consistent. And harden this edge up a little, just because I don't like it. And there. Okay, so now we have a basic bevel. There's a couple ways you can go about shooting shadows on this. You can go to blending options and you can click drop shadow. I don't always use this. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. It really just depends on what I'm doing and how good the effect comes through. But in this case, I'm not going to use it because I want my shadow to kind of go all the way around it a little bit. And I want it to be a very slight shadow. So I'm going to go, I'm going to select the right layer this time, and I'm going to go around the very edge, of the beetle. And that might be too light. Yeah, too light. Because we want this to have a nice recessed look. Because a bezel would naturally, the stone would be set inside the gold, not laying the top of it. And again, if it's messy, no big deal. We can use the smudge tool to fix it. So your lines don't have to be perfect. And actually smudging it after when you're done can sometimes actually even help bring it together a little bit better. So sometimes smudging is a good idea. It's the end-all be-all tool, or at least in my workflow it is. And that's good enough. So now we're going to take the smudge tool and we're going to lower the setting, and we're just going to go around here and clean up some of this. See, like there's yucky, and around here, and down here. Oops. That's not good. Paint a little more shadow here. And we're going to smudge it back out. There. I think that's good. Now, gold would naturally have a little bit of tawniness to it, as I mentioned earlier. So to get a good tawny look, we're just going to take our shape dynamics off. See, I told you I have to practice that word. And we're just going to kind of burn in some shadows and see how it turns it almost like a yellowy gold. And then we're going to take our dodge tool and set it to highlights this time, not shadows. And we're going to go in and we're going to add a little bit of shine to it. Now you may at this point decide, my bezel seems a little bit too small. You can fix that by making it a little bigger. Of course, if you do this, you'll have to smudge it again, so I'm just going to leave it the way that it was. Now for the next thing, since my gold is pretty satisfactory at this point, we're going to paint a T across here because scarabs have an almost T shape across them. So we're going to select where our ellipse tool was, but we're going to use the line tool instead. And let's see, do we want a 1 pixel line? No, I think that's a little too small. So let's try 3. 3 is looking good. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint, we'll draw the line, and then we're going to draw, oops, we want them to connect, so make sure you start here, and then you draw a T just like that. And you have this on a new layer. You're going to want to go to blending options, and this is where I will actually use drop shadow, because and I want it to be in the middle, and maybe not that much. Now if you find that your T is looking a little too sitting above the bevel, you can now take this line and blur it out just on the edges. Just a little bit to kind of blend it. And also you want it to look like it's naturally bowed. So we're going to do, oops, not midtones. We're going to use highlights, and we're going to dodge in, or burn in rather, some shadows so that it looks like it's rounded off. And I can see that my drop shadow is still a little too sticking out of the side, so I'm going to just pull that back, darken that up, and that's good. And if you want, you can always duplicate the layer, which will give it a more prominent line, but we're not going to do that. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our bevel layer, and we're going to paint one side of the wing. Now, like I said, wait, actually, you know what? Let's undo that, and let's add this on a new layer instead. It's always good to add everything on a new layer because it enables you to, no, I don't like that. It enables you to have everything kind of separated, and I don't like that either. Hello, cannot paint a scarab wing today. Okay, that's good. And I've moved this layer below that bezel layer, so I'm painting behind it. And if your scarab wing is not perfect, it's okay, because you can always kind of mess around and get something you like a little better. And just paint this in. And we're only going to paint this on one side because we want them to be the same, like have symmetry to them on both sides. So we're only going to paint one side, and then we're going to duplicate it and then flip it to the reverse side so that they match. But for now, we're just going to paint this one side, and we're going to add more jewels. And like I said, this will take you some time because it's kind of a process to get it all right and perfect. Especially where scarabs are concerned, because there's a lot of jewels. And I usually paint the inside of it once again because I want there to be a recession to it. And once again, I'm going to repeat myself. If it's not perfect, it's okay, because you can push this around using the Smudge Tool. And get it exactly how we want it to be. Now, I mean, at this point, after I'm done with this, that is, you can paint guidelines because you're going to be painting jewels over this, and you want the jewels to be fairly consistent. So what you can do is, oh, that must be the shadow. You can actually add a new layer and paint in guidelines, which you can later delete. And we'll just do this for kegs. And you want them to be fairly consistent, so it's probably best to start in the middle. No. I paint so unstraight, it's scary sometimes. Okay, these aren't actually part of the design. These are just going to show you where you're going to be painting your jewels at. So if you want, you can even like turn them down a little, so you know that they're not really kind of there, they're just guiding you. And then you go to new layer, oops, and okay, so we're going to paint jewels. Typically in ancient Egypt, there are a certain amount of jewels that you would see in Egyptian jewelry. Carnelian, lapis, as I've already showed you, onyx, and chrysoprase, which is a green stone. So we're going to alternate these stones, and we're going to paint them square. So we'll use the carnelian. I mean, and you can use like any combination of that. You don't have to have all three colors in here. So I think I'm going to go with carnelian and chrysoprase, which will look very much like a Christmas tree. And once you have this color established, don't worry about changing the color, because you can always sample from that again. And you just alternate with the chrysoprase and the carnelian. And once again, we're painting on a new layer, so we have full control over these jewels. And you want to follow your lines too, because in a scarab, it would be cut to the bezel setting that it would be set in. So you just follow the lines, and you'll be good to go. And you just keep alternating. And get really tiny. You might have to zoom in for this. And you can see that I don't have actually good coverage with my stones, so I'm going to go back and fix that in a minute, because you want them to be really colored in here. And I'm doing a very sloppy job at it. But that's okay. Like I said, it's work in progress. It all takes time and patience and messing around with stuff to get a perfect end result. And keep going, and it's getting really small now. You want it to go all the way to your shadow. So we're going to keep going. Now we've got like square, almost rectangular shapes going. And one more up to do it. And there we go. So I'm going to zoom back out. And that's what we have so far. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to burn in my shadows. And I'm just going to kind of follow them around, especially in between the stones. But you want to make sure that they're all the way around, because even though these are not cabochons per se, because they're not rounded, they're still going to be made up of faience, which is that shiny, almost acrylic material that you see in ancient Egypt jewelry. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because once again we'll fix that. And then we're going to add our shininess using shadows. And you kind of want them to be a little messy, because faience is kind of made out of them. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's like almost like an acrylic, but it's, I think, made from a plant. I'm not 100% sure on that. But you just kind of want to, you know, get a little bit of inconsistency there, because it's not perfectly smooth either. It's almost like saran wrap, or not quite saran wrap, but you get the idea. I'm going to smooth it out once again. You don't really have to do much with those because they're so small you can't really see anyway. And that's the first level painted. And actually this is kind of skinny up here. It would be better if your wing was spread out more. I didn't account for that, so I'm just kind of playing it by ear and showing you with what I've got rather than starting over yet again. So now we're going to add a new layer, and we're going to paint another layer. And this time I think I'm going to do onyx for the entire layer. Like a large piece of onyx that's been cut to the scarab. And once again, you want to follow your line here. And we're going to paint it in. And we didn't go up far enough, so I'm going to make this really tiny and little. And I'm going to go up in here. And I'm going to fix that. Oops. Fix that. Okay. And we're going to, once again, this time we're going to have to go a little bit bigger for our highlight. And this is going to kind of shiny its way up. Yes, that's a technical term. Shiny its way up. because I said so. That's why. And we're just going to kind of push it around like we did before and kind of get it to where we want it. And actually, you can actually use real photographs for this if you have them, and I actually do. And you know, I think the onyx might be a little tiny dark. So I'm going to go ahead and lighten it. And I'm going to use the legacy to do that. And contrast. And then I'm going to add my third layer. Once again, I'm going to go back to my original colors, red and green, or chrysoprase and carnelian. And I'm going to stick with the pattern that I've already established. And I'm going to follow this again. Oops. Yikes. Okay, that's not good. And we're going to paint in carnelian stone here. And I think that needs to be a little more squared off. And then we're going to alternate to our chrysoprase. And once again, following the pattern, the lines we've established already. Lines just kind of help you keep it all together and follow, you know, a definitive path so that you're not all over the place. And you want to make sure your angles are proper to where you're painting them to as it's going around. And like I said, you know, it takes a little bit of time to do all this. But I mean, it'll add a little special something that's all your own to your images. I like to, when I do Egyptian styled images, I love to paint jewels in. In fact, it's probably mostly the only kind of art that I really do this style of jewel with. Just because it's, you know, most commonly found in ancient Egypt, so it gives me a good excuse to do it. That to flare out a little bit. So follow what I've kind of already got going. And we're just going to keep going until we get to the top, and this is going to be the last row that we're going to paint in place. And I'm going to quit switching. It's easier to just sample it from the others. A lot quicker. Yeah, we're getting smaller now. Painting teeny tiny jewels. And we ended in green, so we want to make sure that we're consistent with that. So we want to end on green. And I think that that's what we're going to do right there. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, that's better. And then we're going to zoom out and see what we've got going here. And then we're going to burn in our shadows. Oops. Yet once again, making sure to stay with the angle of our jewels. Painting the shadows in between. I'm lightening up on my tablet stylus here because I want it to be a thinner line. And since I have shape dynamics enabled, I can do that. And then come back over here and I want to paint this darker. And I want to give it a little bit of a shadow here too, so that it has that nice recessed look. And I can see that I didn't necessarily stick with my bezel here, so I'm going to go back and fix that. And all I have to do is just kind of push it around a little bit, get it a little bit more consistent. And you could also mess around and try to resize the jewels since they're on their own layer if you wanted to. I'm just going to push around with the shape of the wing instead. No big deal. And there, that's better. And since I'm already on this layer, I'm going to go ahead and paint in my shadows. I'll pick a smaller pixel brush to do that, so that I have a nice bezel going around it. And once again, it's sloppy looking right now, but the Smudge Tool can save me. And just smooth it out. And burn my mid-tones in for my gold. And dodge my highlights in for my gold. Oops, that might be a little bit too harsh. And now we're going to figure out which layer it was that we put this on. There it is. Alright. And now we're going to switch back to shadows and dodge this side in. Once again, I want to be a little sloppy with it because faience is not perfectly smooth. And we're going to smooth it out a little bit, not too much though. And there, I think we've got pretty much one side of our scarab done. So I'm going to go ahead and merge these down. Yeah, that's the full. And I'm going to, whoa, yikes, not too bright. And where's my bezel at? Move this up, push this down, and I'm going to duplicate my entire layer. As you can see, it merged all the jewels down and the bezel. And then we're going to go to transform and flip horizontal. Now you might need to adjust this because we painted it for the other side. It may not fit perfectly over here. So you might find that you have to do a little post work to it, but you want it to be consistent with the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and merge that down. And I'm going to go in here and fix what I've got going here. And if you have to, you can always paint it in a little bit, because you can really make it blend, you know, using the smudge tool and stuff anyway. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical either, because I don't think that in ancient Egypt they could make things necessarily perfectly symmetrical. So a little bit of variation might actually kind of lend more realism to it, even though it doesn't necessarily look real at this point. But it's getting there. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and resize all of this because I need a little more room to work. And then I've allotted myself in my scene. Oops. So I'm going to select all my layers. I'm going to go to scale, and this is going to allow me to transform the entire thing. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add another layer. And this time I'm going to use carnelian color. And I'm going to paint a sun. Because every scarab beetle is always holding a sun. Scarabs were symbolic of the rising sun and spontaneous creation in ancient Egypt. So they were dung beetles basically, and so they're always depicted as rolling dung or the sun because they were, you know, worshipped back then. So they always have them with a sun on their crown, just as I've done right here. And usually they even have legs sticking out of here that hold the sun, which we're going to paint too, but just for starters, where is that? That would be here. Yes, that would be there. Oh, and at this point you can delete that because we don't need it anymore. That was just our guideline for painting. And if you find that your lines are a little too harsh, you can use a hard-edged brush on the smudge brush and just kind of go around and kind of smooth it out a little bit. Like that right there. And I think it's just a little too smudgy for my taste, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Oops. You don't want to smudge your jewels, so you have to be careful because I've actually merged this down at this point, so my jewels are not separate anymore. You don't necessarily have to merge I tend to do it because it's easier for me to control when I'm like resizing or doing other things, or when I want to affect multiple things with the brightness and contrast, because with brightness and contrast you can only do one layer at a time. So if I want it consistent, I end up merging it down. It's easier for me than remembering a bunch of numbers or settings for each layer that I would have to do separately, kind of thing. There. I'm going to go ahead and kind of fix some of this up a little bit. And I'll merge my bezel down onto the other bezel. And I've got midtones selected. Darn it! You have to watch that, because midtones are definitely different than highlights. So it depends on the shadow that you're going for, on which one you would naturally use. The midtones tend to give a little bit of a more ruddy tone to them, whereas the highlight is more for shadowing, as shadows would naturally be like a almost grayish black. And my scarab lost its shape a little bit here, so I'm going to fix that too. And you usually end up with a smudgy mess by the time you're done, but like I said, with a little patience and the smudge tool, you can fix it up, make it look beautimous. Okay, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to add a new layer. I'm not sure if I want this to be behind, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint. Actually, I've just decided I want it to be in front. So I'm going to go ahead and paint my leg in. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Oops, yuck, that side was not so successful. Now remember, we're painting over this layer, or this layer rather, so you want to be careful to get it right on the edge of that layer. And it's actually not above the sun jewel, so I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, yikes. I don't want that there. It's okay, we can erase it. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to paint more. And where these legs sit, you might have to like mess around a little bit. And yeah, I'm going to have to pull this up. I'm running out of space here. If you have to adjust it though, it's not really a huge deal. Just want to make sure that you're being consistent. And that's kind of not consistent, but oh well. Again, you know, consistency is not always. I think I'm going to do yeah, not like that. And someone's texting me in the other room. So I'm going to pause this for a second just so that I can make sure it's nothing important. Okay, unpaused, and I'm back. It was just Anne texting me. She's actually in Georgia right now. So she was letting me know that she got there okay. Because that's how we roll. Anyway, back to my legs. So I'm just painting some happy legs in here. And I don't know if I'm actually going to keep these or if I'm going to start over or not. I don't know if I like the double legs. Decisions are the worst. Alright, we'll stick with them for right now and we'll see how they end up. And did I... Oh, why do I always do that? That's one thing that you have to make sure that you don't do. As you can see, I've painted part of the legs on one layer and part of the legs on another. This is going to complicate things. It's nothing that I can't handle, but you kind of want to make sure that you don't do that because I do it a lot. I get mixed up and I end up painting on a different layer than I intended because once the layers start getting, you know, plentiful, you may not realize that you're doing it, and then by the time you've painted everything, it's like, well, I'm not going to go back. I'm just going to have to work with what I got. But it's really heinous when you do it and it's on a background layer, and then you can't isolate anything. So that's not good. And actually what we're going to do is I'm going to pull this back down. I'm going to merge it onto this layer because I've got some weirdness going on here since part of it was painted on the other layer and part of it was not. And there's Anne again. Once again, that's how we roll. And I think I have my smudge just a little too low, so I'm going to bring that back up. And I'm going to smudge my legs out because they're just not working out for me at all. It's okay though, I'll get it. I have resolve, and we'll stick with it and work through it until I get something that I like. I don't know if I would call it resolve though, it's more of being a masochist or something. Oops, that's not good. What we can also do to fix this is to use darken or lighten on our smudge tool, because that'll actually kind of grab what you've got and help you what's the word? Fix it. Yeah, that sounds like a good word to me. And I guess that's okay. It's not great or wonderful or brilliant, but it'll suffice. If I were doing this for real, and I mean for like an image or something, I'd probably work hours doing this. This is a tutorial though, and I want to keep it relatively short. I mean, I don't want to bore you guys for 14 hours on painting, because, yeah, that's enough to drive anyone crazy, I'm sure. There's only so many ways I can be goofy to entertain you guys while I'm sitting here horsing around. So, yeah, I'm not going to make it perfect today, but I'm going to, you know, play around with it and see what I can get in a short period of time. Oops. And I kind of want a straighter line than that, and I want it to define that the legs are sort of coming out of the scarab. Like so. And if it looks really sloppy, once again, don't worry about it. You can fix it. And the shadow would fall here, and the shadow would fall here, shadow would fall here. I mean, and it also depends on your scene, where you place your shadows and your highlights too. I'm just doing this in a normal PSD layer, you know, not anything artsy or remotely. Make sure, aha, I don't have shape dynamics on. That could be part of my problem. And I'm not doing this in any like art scene or something, so you know, I don't really have lighting set up for this, so I'm just kind of playing it by ear. But if you're doing this for an image, you know, you naturally want to follow the light that's in the image, or you won't get a good result. Lighting is absolutely important to get a good render. And I'm going to go ahead and dodge in some highlights on my legs. And you know, gold, once again, may not be perfectly smooth. So you can kind of play up your highlights here a little bit. And let's try this. No, don't like that. And yeah, I do like that. And you know what? I'm gonna widen this leg just so. And I'm gonna widen this leg just so. Widen this one. Widen this one. So they actually look more leg-like. And I don't like where that's landing. And yeah, I'm not really crazy about the legs. So if I want to get rid of them, and I've merged my layers, I would have to erase. But I would have to erase very carefully because it's merged down onto the layer. So if I want to erase, I want to zoom in way close and be really careful about it. And I also want to turn on shape dynamics for this because depending on how hard you press, will give you a smaller line, which can be more accurate in erasing stuff. And, you know, I mean, like I said, once you're, you know, painting and stuff, you may get to the point like I just did and decide, oh, I don't really like that. Nope, 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 not gonna fly. And then you just can it. Or you can repaint it. And you can keep working at it. And do it again and again and again. as long as you want to keep trying to get a decent result. And then I'm not going to do legs. What else do I want to do to this thing? Well, actually, you can actually add, let me see, open, I've got to browse to, where is that stinky folder? I have pictures of gemstones because I collect rocks. I'm a nerd. I know. You don't have to tell me. But I actually collect gemstones and stuff. And I have a bunch of different ones. So you can actually use a stone. I'm going to use my sodalite. I'm going to take a sample from it. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to just go to define pattern. And it's going to make it a new pattern. And then on this layer, I'm going to go to blending options, pattern overlay. And I'm going to click the sodalite that I just imported. Now, you can see that it's lost all the shadows. We don't want that. So we're going to find something that will overlay it rather nicely. And doing this actually can give it a little bit more of a realistic look, like it's a real stone, as opposed to a faience or a fake stone, that's made up of resins or whatever. And I think Carbonite looks the best. And then you just kind of scroll through all the effects until you get one that overlays right. I think Vivid Light is too strong. Decisions are the worst. You can also play with the opacity. I think I like that. Maybe a little more defined. And then you can do that. Had I not merged this, I would do the same thing. But we'll do it to the Sun Jewel. And then at this point, you can just paste. I made it a little pinky, though. So instead of using linear light, I'm going to go to luminosity. Not working out for me. But you can play with the different settings and see if you can. That might be good. Color dodge. We don't want it to be purple, so it's picking up too much of the color of the texture itself. And actually, divide might be good. Or you can, sample a different stone completely. Like I have here, this is actually a piece of carnelian that I own. Define the pattern again. I'm just going to close that. Go to blending options, pattern overlay. And now we actually have real carnelian on our stone. We can scroll through and see if we can get a good effect going. I think that's it. And like I said, had I not merged this one, there, and again, texting the crap out of me. Blending options, pattern overlay, and go to overlay again. And like I said, had I not merged this, because now it's going to show up on the gold, and you may not actually want that. And just kind of scroll through, and that's kind of weird. I kind of like it though. It's kind of, I don't know, abstracty. Just kind of scroll through and get a good effect. But I'm not actually gonna keep this because it's showing up on my gold. And I don't want that. And finally, if this is going to be a piece of jewelry, actually, you're going to want to eventually merge it completely down onto a new layer. And you want to do it in a certain order, starting with the lowest layer. And you want to merge it down like this. Because if you have layer properties applied to a certain layer and you merge something down on top of it, it will take effect of those layer properties. And you may not want it to do that. Then you're going to go to blending options, and then you're going to go to drop shadow. And we're going to, now you see it's showing up that there's a lot of mistakes or erase marks here. We can fix that. Not a big deal. But just kind of give it a shadow. And I'm going to take a minute to erase all these yucky marks over here, here, and up there. And you always want to make sure that you, like when you're applying this to a character or a piece of clothing or something, that you have the drop shadow in place. Because if it's not, it won't look as real. Once again, lighting is extremely important, as much as shadows are for realism. And while your painting is never going to look perfectly real, unless you're like some rockin' artist that's gone to school and, you know, really knows how, has natural talent and really knows how to make it look real. I'm not that artist. I paint if I like the way that it looks. I'm okay with it. It doesn't have to look perfectly real to me, so a lot of my art tends to have almost a painty comic book quality to it. I don't know how to explain it other than that, but it's definitely not hyper real. But if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. So whatever it is, it is what it is. And that pretty much will conclude this tutorial for today. I'm painting jewels. You know, I've been wanting to convert my old tutorial for it to video, so I figured now was a good opportunity to do so. And hope you'll join me next time. See you then. Lates.